back. James Harden right on target. Bang, bang, George Niang to Paul Reed from Tyrese Maxey.
Joel Embiid.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Podcast. Back at it today after, it's been an interesting path of the Sixers this year. And here to join me, I have Zach Ciavolella of Philly Sports Network, friend of the pod, been on before, and happy to have him back. So, Zach, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. Happy to be back. I say great. That's because I'm excited to be back. As far as all things Sixers, great is not a word that I would use for the current situation, but hopeful. We'll see. We're starting to get the kind of early rumblings. The kind of pre-trade talk, and that's kind of my wheelhouse, my season. I love it. So I am. I'm starting to kind of turn that and get that second win. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, definitely hitting kind of the exciting part of the season. And we'll give a quick overview. We're going to kind of touch on the Sixers as they are, a little status report, vibe check on how they're doing, the injury reports, all that, and then touch into kind of some solutions to the injury issues and that they're kind of plagued with. So before we get fully into it, kind of frustrating how things have gone, as it kind of felt like the Sixers were starting to turn a corner. We were seeing more like fight in this team, them kind of having an identity again, starting to get back to it. Joel Embiid, obviously, all through his heroics and playing some of the best basketball that I've ever seen, and then kind of hitting that wall of injuries. Now we got Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, and Joel Embiid all set to miss some time. Obviously, the return of Ben Simmons to Philadelphia has really lost its allure without those three in the floor. So unfortunate. Zach, how are you feeling about this team in general, and just what a blow are all these injuries?
Yeah, it's not fun. I was there for the Harden injury. I was there for the Maxey injury. I missed the Embiid injury. I don't even know what my reaction would have been if I had seen that live, but just with each one, as you watch them, whether you're watching them, whether you're in attendance, whether you're watching them at home, there's just this like deflation that kind of comes with it. And I think it was kind of in increasing order, just how deflating each injury was, losing James Harden, that sucks. There's not another word for it. That being said, we have Tyrese Maxey, our young rising star. We have Joel Embiid, who is a top 3 player in the NBA without argument, year in and year out. So to have those two guys, we're going to be fine. Tyrese Maxey comes up hopping against the Bucks, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, right. That we're feeling not so great. We're really losing the guards, especially. We still got the big man, 101 points. I think I forget exactly how many it was. Over 100 points in a 24-hour span. Still got him. He's playing best basketball of the season. We're going to be great. Next thing you know, George Niang falls into Joel Embiid's foot, and you don't know what's going to happen. And so obviously they didn't win that game against Minnesota. You felt a little bit better after you saw Embiid come back, right after, make that diving play on the loose ball, come back with that insane 3. Centers don't hit that normally.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a guy on a bad foot who is over 7 feet hitting that shot in the fourth quarter. Like that, I think that needs to be talked about more, but obviously the focus is going to be the injury. It's not overly encouraging, just because any time without Joel Embiid is rough time, to be frank. That being said, this is the early part of the regular season still. Right. There's still plenty of the year to make up, for what is left to be done. The Sixers have, I believe, one of the easier schedules left, considered left in the league so far this season. So, we'll see what it exactly looks like. They do still have tough matchups. They have to face Denver twice. They have to face Milwaukee 2 more times, Boston thrice. But with that being said, there's also there's like 3 games against the Hornets in a very short span. Yeah. I kind of wish Embiid was there for that, because we might see a 60-point game from Joel Embiid. But the point I'm getting to is that it's frustrating. It will end, right? So 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks at the latest, we should have all 3 of these players back.
Mhm.
and there's going to be a rest of the regular season. So it's not time to hit the panic button.
Yeah, and I think you did an excellent job summing that all up. And for me personally, like the Harden injury, it started. I was kind of like, obviously, you'd never want to see these guys injured, but with the Harden one, he kind of showed me something in the game of him playing through pain, doing all he can, hitting
Oh
a big
yeah,
three down that game. Yeah, I was excited about that effort from Harden, and then you hate to see the news after the fact. The Maxey
yeah,
injury, I was pretty concerned right away, just because like we've
yeah,
never seen him really react like that. We've never seen him
yeah,
like in that amount of pain and him limping around the court and just very clearly expressing it. And then with Embiid, I'm honestly grateful that the midfoot sprain is the diagnosis. Watching that and seeing the play, I was pretty frightened of what that could potentially be with how bad that it looks similar to like an offensive lineman rolling up and getting rolled up on,
yeah,
kind of how I
yeah,
compare it. And then to see him stay in that game and put a pretty heroic effort diving across the floor, hitting that three, falling to his knees was awesome. But I kind of had that
yeah,
thought in my back of the head, like, I don't think this guy's fully healthy. And I guess
yeah,
the biggest bright spot is how much season there is left, is like get these guys recovered, get back. But at the same time, these Sixers did not put themselves in a great spot here, considering we're had a slow start to the season, sitting at 500 and eighth place in the East with these guys going out. So what do you think the mindset of the team should really be? Is it just kind of survive and try and cling on while these guys get healthy? Or is there anything they can do to kind of overcome this?
yeah. I think that for the most part, it's kind of survive and kind of cling on. You don't. The one thing you want to do is you want to avoid making a reactionary decision, right?
Mhm.
So, obviously, the first thought is, well, let's make a big, splash edition. Let's go out and do something. And I'm not saying that a move is not part of the answer inherently, right? So
Yeah.
there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. But the last thing that you want to do is go out and trade Tobias Harris for Gordon Hayward, for instance. Like, that's and we'll get into more of that kind of stuff later. But it's like you don't want to just be like, well, now we have to trade Matisse Thybulle. Well, now we have to trade Korkmaz. Like you can put that to anybody's name, like
Right.
Jaden Springer, even who's of the clearly available assets. So I'm excluding Maxey from that conversation. He's in the near top of those assets. So you don't want to effectively handcuff yourself later in the season because there's still, like I said, so much season left. There's a lot that's going to happen after December 15th. There's even more that's going to happen after January 15th.
Yeah.
Then there's the NBA trade deadline. So with all this, especially since the Sixers are hard capped, there's a lot you have to take into consideration. And while it may not be what the fans want to hear, what they want to see, you're probably looking at a situation where you kind of ride this out for the time being.
Yeah, I agree. And we're gonna touch on and before we get back to it, I would like to also say, like, I still think this is a roster that isn't complete, that there needs to
Sure.
be some sort of addition. So to me, I
Yeah.
do look at it as a little bit of an opportunity with that like because you need to make some sort of move or some sort of additions anyway, maybe now is the time to move up that priority and get shopping, at least test out if there's anything that plays itself out. But as you
Yeah.
pointed out, there's still plenty of time to panic. And in the meantime, this is a great chance to evaluate the guys that they do have on roster and see what they have for these guys in the rotation fighting to secure their place. So a couple of guys that I think stand out to me that I think have a lot to prove in this is Shake Milton and Montrezl Harrell were the first two that hopped to mind. As far as Shake seems to me like a guy who has struggled to kind of do his job in a maximum way in a minimum role, and the way that like he seems to be a guy who is, as we've known since his tenure, when he has kind of his free reign to play as he pleases, we've seen some positive things. There's always obviously the Clippers explosion. He's had a couple 20+ point performances coming off two very strong games. And Montrezl Harrell, a guy who really, from my perspective, has been the biggest disappointment of the additions. And I was excited about the aspect of having a big man who has some offensive ability, some creation, and just having a different option to be able to throw in when it's the right matchup. And that really has not come into fruition. He hasn't done much of anything outside of, trying to fight Giannis after he throws the ladder across the floor. But outside of those two, do you agree with those two takes? Or are there any other guys you're looking at to step up during this time?
Yeah, well, I really want to see Shake Milton
Mhm.
in this new role. Kind of following up on what you said. We saw a lot of it against Minnesota, right? 27 points. More of a lot of consistent scoring out of him. There wasn't like he went off for 15 in a quarter. It was a little more methodical, and that leads me to believe that perhaps there's a chance that he could replicate something like this. I'm not saying another 25-point outburst. What I'm saying is just like consistent shooting and scoring. That's what I'm looking for out of Milton, because
Yeah.
we talk about Tobias Harris and his role kind of being thrown off. Shake Milton's a guy who's he's been in the right role for 1 year of his career. And other than that, he's been just kind of moved around willy-nilly as is. I want to see him really kind of either prove that he can play that role with this currently constructed Sixers squad, or I want to see him adapt into a new type of role. Potentially even that, and I know DeAnthony Melton is the best player on the bench. So when I say this, I don't mean better than DeAnthony Melton, but that kind of scoring sixth man, that kind of, potential lead scorer off the bench, because while DeAnthony Melton's the best player off the bench, his scoring, it comes and goes. He's a talented shooter, great on the fast break. He's not always looking for his bucket, which is not inherently a flaw. With Shake Milton, I want to see a little bit more of that aggressiveness, because when Shake gets aggressive and the shot starts falling, he gets confident. When Shake Milton gets confident, he gets dangerous. And I'm not saying he turns into Klay Thompson, but I mean, listen, a confident Shake Milton, it's a whole nother level of a player than what we've seen to start out this season. Because you're right, he's been a little underwhelming to start the year. But if he can get those more consistent minutes, if he can get a little bit more aggressive, see the shot falling a little bit, that confidence will come. And then we're really, I think, going to see the Shake Milton who Joel Embiid knows is in there. Joel Embiid was talking about recently how close the two of them are. It's the Shake Milton that Joel sees when he looks at him, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Shake Milton that we all remember, that Doc remembers from that Clippers game, right. That I think that there is a way to get back to that to a degree. So that on Shake Milton. And as far as Montrezl Harrell, I think you're right. Disappointment is, I think it's a partially accurate word. I think that there is not an overwhelming amount of surprise. I think what is surprising is how early we're noticing the deficiencies.
Yeah.
I think we expected them to kind of be hidden a little bit more in the regular season. That's typically been Harrell's MO. Teams are, and perhaps it's all matchup based, but for whatever reason, we're just not seeing the same old Montrezl Harrell. I was expecting a little bit more in the rebound department, in particular from Harrell. That I truly believe is also coaching. If I'm being frankly honest, if you watch this team and how they're coached to rebound the ball, they work on a lot of prevention of transition points, right? So they're not crashing the boards like a Milwaukee is, for instance. Obviously Minnesota's going to, because every single player is over 7 freaking feet. But you get what I'm saying. Like they're not coached the same way on how to rebound. So the Sixers, they don't do a ton of boxing out. And I'm not just talking about Joel earlier this season with his hand. I'm talking about that's not necessarily what they're there to do. They're there to prevent defense, run their offense, and hopefully that will win the day. Maybe it will. But I think that he is kind of a combination of there's a little bit of the disappointing play and a little bit of, surprisingly, the fit is not as clean as I was expecting coming back to Doc Rivers. So we'll see if that. I honestly don't know if the solution is more Paul Reed. I know everybody wants to say it's more Paul Reed and less Montrezl Harrell, but there's something almost a little off about Paul Reed this season. Now he's had some high highs. Those 6 steals, absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. But I think what it is could easily be the inconsistent play, the kind of back and forth with his role and in the rotation. Mm-hmm. But kind of to your point earlier, maybe the solution's outside.
Yeah.
But I think it's the kind of situation where you need to kind of have, you can't rule anything out, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to rule out, and narrow down before making a decision. But at this point, the Sixers can't be ready to rule anything out. And whether that is adjusting the coaching style, whether that is, Montrezl can just play better. Let's be flat out honest about that.
Yeah.
That's true about almost any player. You can play better. I can be better at my job. Anybody can just be better. That's a fact. Is the solution more Paul Reed? Is the solution, we never should have cut Charles Bassey. There's all kinds of stuff like that. That you can say. But I think it's going to take some time. I think it's going to take some soul searching, and that's kind of what the regular season's for. One thing I wanted to mention before I forgot, kind of to your point, mentioning the idea of making an addition, is that there is also a benefit to making at least a smaller addition now, as opposed to later in the season. Because if you make an addition now, you can theoretically potentially trade that player again by the deadline. So because we're within 60 days, of that trade deadline, you would theoretically have time to do so. So you can. It's not permanent, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
I'm just gonna throw something out there. Let's say you move freaking Korkmaz for Corey Joseph, right? You want to bring in another guard, similar type salaries. Say you just did that straight up and it made sense. You can then use Corey Joseph's salary in a trade later in the season if you need to.
Right.
So there is that kind of optionality. You have that small window right now where that kind of between that and the injuries and the way the season's gone, everything compounding, like this is an important stretch of evaluation. So it's there's going to be a lot for Daryl Morey to be doing right now. Tensions are kind of on,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of good points there. Before we circle to kind of the outside source, I just want to touch on a couple guys internally who haven't been given a chance yet and could have this opportunity to kind of pave the way, specifically with the lack of guard play that the Sixers have with Maxey and Harden now. I think guard was looked at as a point of weakness coming into the season, and with these two out, it's just further magnified. And really an addition that I think they need to make regardless because of that I think there just needs to be a little bit more optionality and just having some flexibility with how you can rotate guards, because we see that James Harden is the only true playmaker on this team, and that's a difficult pill to swallow. So looking at it internally and guys who haven't got a chance yet, the two names that popped in my mind are Jaden Springer and Mac McClung. And coming from very different ends of the spectrum here, Jaden Springer, obviously first round pick in 2021, 28th overall pick, has played a total of 10 NBA minutes, really has not gotten a chance. He's played just about all of his time at the Delaware Bluecoats. You've obviously been down there and have had a chance to look at him firsthand, as well as being at the Sixers as well. But for Springer, I think it's a question of kind of finding a role, figuring out what he is as a player, which I don't think anyone truly has the answer to yet. Do you think he has a chance to kind of get some sort of time here? He's dealing with a quad issue as well, but it doesn't seem to be anything major. What are your thoughts on Springer getting a chance?
Yeah, so I think if it wasn't for the quad injury, the answer is yes. I think that he would be up here. I think he'd be playing with the team. I think he'd get a solid run, to be honest with you, too. Or that he should get a solid run, I guess is the better way to say that. But this quad injury, it's a lingering injury. It's not the first time that he's dealt with this. I believe I think I read it from Justin Grasso of a week was the timeline, I want to say. So Sports Illustrated's Justin Grasso, I think he said about a week was what they were thinking for Springer. So maybe that's a soft week, it could, and this is dated from like late last week. So maybe that's like a soft week. Maybe he is, up and ready to go sooner than that. I'd say the Nets game, it's not likely. But perhaps following that, there's a chance that he kind of cracks in there. Because again, there's still 3 weeks probably before we get Harden and Maxey back. And again, I think Springer's deserving of it. Watching him down in Delaware, and I get it. It's the G League, right? It's not the NBA. I fully understand that. With that being said, there's some things I watched actually Springer a lot with the Bluecoats last year, covering them, and he does look different this year. And what I mean by that is he is sneakily gotten a bit more aggressive. Right. So when he plays down in Delaware, he's not the point guard. Let me be clear about that first and foremost, because that's going to be the question is you're looking for ball handling, everything like that. He's much more of a wing. They even have him playing small forward on a lot of occasions, but even still young, athletic, capable ball handler. But he's started adding a little bit more of aggression from the outside, which is what you wanted to see. He's not knocking them down some crazy percentage. But you like to see that aggression. Hopefully it translates to the NBA level the next time that he's called up. So do I think that he can make an impact for Philadelphia during this time? Absolutely. I do. All depends on this injury. How is he doing? Because honestly, he may even need to rehab it down in Delaware for probably just one game, because the way that the G League games are so spaced out, it may not even make sense if you make him play for 2 games in the G League. But at least one rehab game back with Delaware. And then potentially, you could see him come up. Now, Mac McClung, it's a little bit of a different situation, right? Yeah. So the kind of player that Mac McClung is. And first of all, let me tell you, this guy is one of the reasons to go to Blue Coats games. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
The way that when he chucks shots, this isn't even just like Nick Young. This is like you feel like it's going in. Like you have belief, in the guy. He makes you believe in him. Obviously there's the athleticism, we've all seen that, especially from him at the collegiate level. I do think that the limitations that you see in his game, the size, the straight line speed, I think those are things that would and he's not a point guard either, so to see, at least not a pure point. So to see that kind of player translate to the NBA, it's a little bit more difficult to envision. So unfortunately, I don't think that's the case for Mac McClung, but if Jaden Springer is healthy, I think that he will and should get a run with the Sixers.
Yeah, I like that. And my kind of mindset on it is, why not? Like, try him. Let's see what he's got. He hasn't got a full extended chance yet. If he goes up to the Sixers and sucks during the stretch, like, we're in the same spot of there was no guards anyway. Let's give him a little run. There has been, I haven't watched him play as much this year, but there's been some improvement in his shooting as well. Shooting 40% from three, which is only a 3-game sample size, so don't get too caught up in the numbers. But that's a step in the right direction for a guy that shot 28% from three last year. So we like to see that. And I feel like just having a better idea and seeing who he is as a player, what kind of his fit is important, especially in you don't get these kind of opportunities often to just give some guy some free reign to where if he messes up, it's not that big a deal considering where the team is at. Yeah. So I'm on team play Jaden Springer and let's at least get a chance to evaluate the guy to a fuller extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that in concept. I don't know how the Sixers coaching staff agrees with that concept, but myself personally, I'm in full agreement with you there.
Yeah, sure. So let's shift gears a little bit and get kind of into the meat of the episode here with some kind of outside sources. So as I touched on earlier, I still believe there's things to be done to this roster. I think now is a chance to jump on it, see what's out there. I have a couple free agent targets as well as trades that I kind of think, but I'm going to throw it to you first, Zach. So what are your kind of positions of need and players you're targeting? I'll touch on a little bit. I do think another ball handler, another playmaker is extremely important to have. I also would like to find some more wing depth and a perimeter defender looking long-term. I don't think these are answered in one player by any means, but the addition to be made. So what's your mindset for this team and who are some top targets that you have?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to shout out my guy. Grant Riller I'm a Grant Riller believer, right? So he's with Dallas right now. He's only playing and when Dallas, I mean the Texas Legends, the G League affiliate. They're kind of ramping him up. He is still coming off an injury from the year previous, so they're ramping him up a bit. He's averaging, I want to say it's about 20. It's just under 30 points per game per 36 minutes, right? So the scoring's there. He's not handling the ball as much as he has in the past, but just knowing Grant Riller from the tape seen in the past, from what we've seen in the summer league, he can handle it. He can pass it. He's a good facilitator. He's a good playmaker. So Grant Riller is somebody who I think should constantly be on the potential target list for Philadelphia if they're looking to add a guard there. But there's some interesting names, like for people who have followed the NBA for a few years. It's not the most encouraging list at the same time. So, why don't we go through some of your names? I have a more kind of couple hidden guys, but who do you have, for instance?
Okay, so us to start out with, and these are all primarily guards, just because I think that's the point of weakness. I'm kind of looking at this as
fully agree with the guard point, by the way.
Yeah, appreciate that, and I do think the focus is add a guard now and kind of let the wing market play itself out. Let that kind of. I think there's nothing glaring, I think, available. And these are guys, I'll start with the free agent list. DJ Augustine's first one that jumps to mind, 35 years old, last played with the Lakers 2 seasons ago. You know what he is, just kind of a standard point guard, a guy that does the job. Eric Bledsoe, another one, currently playing with the Shanghai Sharks. Mm-hmm. Again, we're not looking at the top of the top here, but guys that can come and do a job. I'll throw them at you 3 at a time here. And familiar face, Trey Burke, 29 years old, last played.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Last played the Sixers 2019-20, averaged 13.2 minutes, 5.9 points, 2.1 assists, shot 42% from three. Any of those 3 guys appeal to you?
Well, DJ Augustine, for many years, I've wanted him to play for the Philadelphia 76ers in a reserve guard role. I think that he is just about finished, unfortunately. So he's not a guy that I think can really. The one thing that you could have said about him in the past, was the efficiency shooting. But now he's an undersized guard, and now he's that much older. He's been that much more beat up by the NBA grind. I feel like if you bring on Augustine, he's either going to be wildly inefficient or he's going to be moderately inefficient, and you're going to be looking for another replacement because he got hurt not too long after that. So I like Augustine from like a personal standpoint. I don't know how that exactly fits. Eric Bledsoe is interesting. So Bledsoe, better defender than Augustine. Obviously more athletic, even though he's not that kind of like mini LeBron that he used to be back in the day.
Right.
The concern obviously is the shot with Bledsoe. I don't know what the ramifications are of buying on his contract overseas, but I don't think it'd be that large of an issue. So he's somebody who I think will be on a few different teams' radar, if that makes sense. And I can see it basically. Yeah. I don't love it because again, there's the lack of the shot. But I could see it there. I'm sorry, who was the third guy again?
Trey Burke.
Oh yeah, how could I forget Trey Burke? Yeah, so Trey Burke, right? He's like floated all over. Obviously, he's a part of that Christian Wood trade during the offseason. I was very excited for Trey Burke to be coming to Philadelphia during his first tour. I would say of those three guys, I would probably lean closest to going for Trey Burke because I think that his skill set is more so the kind that you lean on with one of these type of free agents, as opposed to, Eric Bledsoe, you're thinking I'm going to be getting playmaking, I'm going to be getting, strong defense, and maybe you will, maybe you won't. I think that the likelihood of Trey Burke's game still kind of holding on, even though he's a bit removed from a consistent role in the NBA, is just more likely than you seeing that in Eric Bledsoe. So I would say Trey Burke of those three guys. You went a little bit different than I expected you to kind of go with the list.
Okay.
I know that some people have been talking about Avery Bradley, for instance.
Sure.
I'm not an Avery Bradley guy anymore. I'm going to be flat honest with you. Like there was a time. But so he's not really there for me. One guy who he's not really like a point, but if you want to call him a guard who can handle a little bit, DeAndre Bembry kind of solves that, that off guard general wing role a little bit. You're going to kind of be hard pressed to get a suitable point guard, I feel like, in this market. Like when you're thinking about like a pure point, but there are other guys you can get who kind of play that point role, who can serve kind of other needs, right? So I'm kind of using this to set up Sharif Cooper, who is another guy who I think is interesting. Now, obviously, he's a younger guy. That like red flag for Doc Rivers right there. So that like this is not likely. This is just what I think would be a worthwhile investment for you. Like, you can say like, oh, I want Sharif Cooper. And, next thing you know, the Sixers are like, hey, we signed Alfred Payton. Like that's kind of like the way that I envision that going. But that's kind of why I like Trey Burke as well, is that I want to see that that offensive, that gunner kind of mentality a little bit from a free agent that they look for. Because I think, first of all, it's something that they lack on the bench already. And on top of that, to be able to consistently do that, even though you haven't been playing at the NBA level in a little bit, I think it's going to be rough the first few games. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be easier to fall back into that because guys can straight up like lose a bit of athleticism and they're no longer quality defenders. And that's a little bit of my worry with Eric Bledsoe. So you don't really have that concern as much when you're looking at a Trey Burke or, obviously a young guy like Sharif Cooper, but neither of them known as defenders, more kind of that score first kind of gunner guard. So those are the guys that I'm a little bit more interested, and absolutely not Rajon Rondo. That's the last thing that I want to say as far as that goes.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of great names there. Sharif Cooper also on my list, a guy that I had kind of a draft crush on coming out of Auburn, really liked in college. A little bit undersized, but he scored 2 40-point games in the G League already this year. He's got a little bit of that juice to him, that it factor, and I think he always has. I think he had fell to the second round, and he was a guy that I personally would have taken with a late first and think he was deserving of that. Rondo is another guy that I did want to touch on. I don't love it either, but I think there's a strong possibility that it happens. We know there's
sure, there's a possibility. Yeah.
Out of
with the Doc Rivers connection, anything can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Out of the list I have, I think Rondo is the one I think is most likely for occurring. And I mean, he's another guy that is well past his prime. He would be the second best playmaker on the Sixers pretty clearly, I think, behind Harden, which would be a positive. I like the Bembry shout as well. I think that's a great name. I would be interested in that. A couple other names that I do want to bring up. Kemba Walker, I don't love, but is a guy that's floated out there.
How did it take us that long to talk about Kemba? I mean, he's the biggest name, I would say, on the market. Like, again, we're talking about kind of, injuries that have racked up and everything over time. And so I'm kind of in the same ballpark as you. Like, I'm a little kind of wary before just signing Kemba Walker. But I think that you can kind of put him in the Rondo category as far as will be looked into, like likelihood to be looked into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I definitely, I think the best name on the market, and I did love Kemba back in the day, cardiac Kemba in his prime. My concern with it is like, if you're going to make an addition here, it has to be a guy that I think has a place in the rotation beyond just this stretch of injuries. And I don't know if I feel that way about Kemba. I don't know, honestly, how much more he provides than a Shake Milton type role. I think they're somewhat similar in play style as far as being a create your own look first, not a true pass guy. Another name I did want to bring up is Thomas Satoransky. And 6'7", looking at him, he currently plays for FC Barcelona, so I would have to investigate the contract issues there. But a guy that I think is a nice passer, just a nice role player, still just 31 years old. I would be pretty satisfied with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's a career 35, a little over 35% 3-point shooter. We know that he can pass with it. I think it's 4 assists per game over his career. Like, he's an efficient guy. Like, is he a defender? No, he's not a defender. Is he versatile? Absolutely, he is. He can play the 1 through 3, within limits, playing small forward, of course. But the guy does, he does like a little bit of everything, and that's. I've always appreciated Tomas Satoransky. I wanted the Sixers to trade for him when he was with the Wizards, a couple of years ago. But to see him, like, I would almost hop him to the front of the list as far as guys who, like, people who we've talked about that I would want. I would kind of hop him to the front of the list just because there is that versatility there. Right. Because you're not wrong when you talk about Kemba Walker. And this can be said too about Trey Burke and Sharif Cooper, is that they're guys that look for their own shot, more often than not. So if you're looking to avoid that, that's when you talk about a Rondo. That's when you talk about a Tomas Satoransky. And Elfrid Payton, right? I mean, I'll bring him up just to bring him up. I did earlier. One other guy kind of on that mindset. He's been hurt. He hasn't played in a while. If they know something we don't, maybe there's a slight chance. What about the return of Michael Carter-Williams? Like, that's just something that, like, that kind of player, like, I don't want the Sixers. I'm not saying I want the Sixers to sign Michael Carter-Williams, although it would be very, warm and fuzzy for the most part. But what I am saying is that, you got a guy with size, defensive instincts, more than capable passer, right? Versatile. Like, there are things about his archetype that you would like in this position. Yeah. It's almost similar to Satoransky in that regard, actually. So one of those guys I think would definitely be interesting. But I think we could also see them just go for a guard and not a point guard. Like, as much as we want them to go for a point guard, they may just be thinking like, guard, okay, let's go. And if they just think guard, let's go, let's hit it. Ben McLemore, I think, makes a lot of sense for this squad, just for everything, for the Houston connections. He's a better shooter than a lot of these guys that we're talking about. He's still got a touch of the athleticism. He's not like he was when he came out of Kansas, but he's a guy who, if they look to go for the off guard instead of the traditional point, I mean, I could see it. It wouldn't be who I would sign. I wouldn't hate him on the roster. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But right now, I kind of agree with you. I kind of do want maybe not that traditional point, because again, I like Trey Burke, I like Sharif Cooper, but I don't want a 2, and Ben McLemore is a clear 2 is the problem.
Yeah, and I think Macklemore was a guy that I had in the category of I wouldn't mind if he just ended up the 15th roster spot in general. And I'm talking
Yeah,
thought this like before the season because, like you said, it makes sense. The Houston ties had his best years next to Harden, playing alongside under Morey, all that, everything that kind of goes into that seemingly Sixers target category. And
yeah,
uh, he would be a guy that fits. I'm still of the mindset of I want another ball handler, another
yeah,
playmaker, because I also with lineups with Maxi's is okay as a playmaker, and I think has taken strides in that area. But I still think he's at his best when like you just don't
yeah,
put that on his plate. So if you can add a guy to when we're running units with Harden off the floor, and there's another guy to still do that, I think that
yeah,
maximizes Maxi as well. So that's kind of my mindset with this list. Would you agree
yeah.
with that?
I would definitely say so. I think Maxi is Maxi's one of the hardest players to get a player comp for, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this is absolutely not a player comp. I want to preface that very loudly. However, he's a little bit Devin Bookerish with the ball, right? So
Yeah.
he's a guy who he can definitely dish to rock. He can do well as a facilitator. That's not his primary function. Like he's not a point guard. He's a two guard who can dish the ball. Like that is Tyrese Maxey's pure role. From everything that I've ever seen. We saw him in the time when Harden's out, and he's done well to kind of fill in those gaps. But when you talk about him playing his game, he's creating his own shot or playing off of James Harden, who he's done a phenomenal job alongside.
Hmm.
And even well against Anthony Melton, who has done very well
Yeah,
as a facilitator
yeah.
in the injury absence. So I do agree full on with you. I think a type of playmaker is the way to go. Um, I think we fleshed out literally every single name, everybody who's ever played basketball. So I think we've done enough with that list as far as the lead guards go, in a sense. I'll just say Chris Dunn, just so his name's been said.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think now we've hit every single one.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss four names out from the trade market, and these are guys I'm not completely sure of their availability, but I think at least worth taking a phone call on. Starting
Sure.
off with Derrick Rose of the New York Knicks. I love D Rose. I feel like he's kind of getting squeezed by the youth movement up in New York. And doesn't seem just completely satisfied with his role.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're kind of feeling on what it would take to get him, but I think that would be a phenomenal addition, both in the short term and just having as like a spark guy off the bench. Looking beyond that, Goran Dragic, who can't be traded till December 15th, but I think another kind of just nice check mark for would fit in what the Sixers need. Kobe White also on the Bulls, and there's been some buzz as far as the Matisse Thybulle interest from Chicago. Mark Eversley also played a role in drafting Thybulle when he worked for the Sixers, so there's that connection there too. And lastly, Devontae Graham from the Pelicans, another guy that I really like quite a bit and is getting squeezed out by just the amount of talent there, playing a career low 14 minutes per game. If there's a low price for Devontae Graham, I would absolutely be willing to pay it. Any of
Yeah.
those?
So I mean, I think all of them too would agree do, right?
Mhm.
So kind of just going through them. First of all, Derrick Rose.
Rocks.
Absolutely, and it's shocking that he's being squeezed out of a Tom Thibodeau rotation. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's frankly what's happening. Is Thibodeau is moving away from Rose. I still can't believe that I'm saying that,
Yeah.
and he's pushing to a degree towards the youth movement. I think Brunson has obviously made a large impact on the lack of minutes available for Rose.
Yeah.
He is being talked about in trades. I think that he could definitely be had for the right price. Um, One kind of thing that is a potential issue for particularly Graham and Rose is matching salary.
Sure.
So the the interesting thing, and we're just going to lean right into this, I think, is when you look at Derrick Rose, 14.5 million. There is another Nick, like, so obviously you think about a matching salary and you're like, well, how many Sixers can we stack on top of each other to get to close enough to that 14 and a half? Conversely, and I am not advocating for this, but there have, of course, been the annual Tobias Harris trade rumors.
Sure.
And whether this were to be to the Knicks or otherwise, I think Harris would actually be an interesting fit on the Knicks, but
Yeah.
that's not inherently where I think he might go if he were to be traded. And for the record, I think it'd be a mistake to trade him at least right now. But just to flesh this out, if you were to combine Derrick Rose with, say, an Evan Fournier There's another guy who's being forced out. Obviously, like it's not going to get the people going, Evan Fournier, right? Like we know that, right? But this is a guy who, he has been serviceable to teams in the past. It's not long since he was a quality player for the Orlando Magic. Now, you know, average player on bad team equals good stats. Like, we've seen that before. But even still, there is a chance that there's something left in the tank. So if you're kind of combining him with Derrick Rose, you figure out what else. Is it a 3-team trade? Is it a 4-team trade? Do you work, Cam Reddish into the deal somehow? Like whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a potential pathway. But as far as Derrick Rose, the player, I'm absolutely more than happy to take a flyer on that, especially since what I'm really curious of is if he doesn't get moved, and this is going to be tough considering the amount of years left on his deal. Is there a chance at a buyout? Because there's that second year, it's a little less likely, but even still, if there is an agreement, Rose is a competitor. We know that. Does he want to compete? Does he accept the buyout under lesser terms? Possibly. He's definitely a guy I would look at in that situation. And I would not rule out trading for him either. So big Derrick Rose guy. Goran Dragic is a little interesting. I don't know that they're going to be ready to give up on him so quickly in Chicago. Sure. That being said, the season's not gone the way they've thought. Kobe White, though, I think is definitely on the table, especially in a potential Matisse Thybulle trade. You're going to need to play with salary a little bit to make that work, but I don't think it's anything that you can't overcome. So that's something that I think would be helpful for both teams. And then finally, Devontae Graham. I'm also a Devontae Graham fan. I've been a fan of his, when he was in Charlotte. Just he's a baller. He's a hooper. Like I love it. I don't even know who he blocked, but he blocked some center the other day. I saw the highlight of. I got to go back to that highlight, but the guy like just surprises you every now and again with something special, and he's aggressive when he's at his best. He can facilitate. So again, you run into like a little bit of a problem with the salary and how to match it and everything, but I'm definitely interested. If the question is, am I interested? Absolutely, I'm interested.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on the Evan Fournier comment real quick, he's also a guy who has about 3 games a year where he looks just like Klay Thompson. So,
sure,
you're
absolutely.
A couple of those red hot nights, which is always a blast. Are there any other names that you kind of have jumping out too? In my bad.
Yeah. So with Fournier, who knows how he'd play along his newly fellow Frenchman Joel Embiid.
Sure.
So you never know. But there's a few different names. So again, we've talked about what are you going to give up, right? So that's obviously the difficult part of the conversation because and these trades, we're talking about, they could be done sooner, they could be done later. Like again, everything is kind of still on the table. But when we're looking at who could be added, what I said for Korkmaz for Corey Joseph, that was not just like pulling something out of thin air. Like that wasn't a joke. Like Corey Joseph, like I think is a legitimate veteran guard. Like I don't want to give up plus assets, but if you're not going to play for Korkmaz, you can do worse than turning him into a more useful position on an expiring deal. Like that's kind of my mindset with Corey Joseph. So he's somebody who I would at least consider because again, you're not going to rush, or you shouldn't rush to move Harris, Thybulle, Springer. Korkmaz, I hate to say it because I really love freaking Korkmaz, is probably the guy that you can kind of like play with a little bit, like that you can, trade him and not necessarily regret it or then compile that that player in the secondary trade once you get closer to the deadline. So I would say Corey Joseph is somebody who I am a little bit interested in. I know it's not the most exciting name, but it's the name I got. Similarly, I think you can even argue Killian Hayes, who's a little bit more of that traditional point, a little bit of that defensive guy. Shot is ugly as sin.
Been rough.
Ugly as sin, that shot. That being said, a huge buy low opportunity. So,
sure.
It's again, not ideal, but none of these moves are going to be. Right. But when you look at some of the higher tier assets that you're trading away, Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, the team that keeps consistently coming up is the Dallas Mavericks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The season's not gone the way that they've thought. There were the Matisse Thybulle rumors Jake Fisher talked about earlier in the year. how the two top teams that were interested or coming up in trade talks, I should say, around Matisse Thybulle were the Portland Trailblazers and the Dallas Mavericks. Well, the Justice Winslow experiment is working phenomenally for Portland, so I don't think that they're quite as interested as they would have been before. But Dallas really kind of limping to even the midway point of the season where they are now. So I think they're a team that you can potentially see a trade. I think if you're talking about kind of a Matisse Thybulle situation, you're more so looking at, how do we do Matisse Thybulle and Furkan Korkmaz for either Reggie Bullock or Dorian Finney-Smith, who Finney-Smith is a guy I would love to get on this team. Like somehow, some way, if there's a way to get Dorian Finney-Smith, I'm all about it, right? And then alternatively, Tobias Harris, if you're talking about landing spots, I think Dallas is a fit for him as well.
Definitely.
You put him alongside. He could play either the 3 or the 4, whatever you want to do there. I would put him naturally at the 4, especially because in this scenario, I'm saying Dorian Finney-Smith is coming to Philadelphia. But it's a natural fit for him. He's unfortunately not reunited with Boban Marjanovic because he's now in Houston. I forgot.
Yeah.
But even still, it's a natural fit for Harris. So you're talking about who can you bring back from Dallas? Dorian Finney-Smith's the guy. Now you're talking about all the high salary players. You're talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. Davis Bertans is just kind of there. He's most likely going to have to be if you're doing a higher dollar trade with Dallas. Davis Bertans is almost certainly going to have to be involved. But the two top guys in Dallas that I would be interested in, Dorian Finney-Smith, first of all, Tim Hardaway Jr. second. I've actually cooled off a good bit on Reggie Bullock.
Really?
He's had an extremely tough year. He is I just don't know how big of an upgrade he would be over Matisse Thybulle straight up.
Wow. Okay.
Because the shot has not been falling, and when the shot's not falling for him, he's a fine defender. He's not near the defender, not even as good an on-ball defender as Matisse Thybulle is. So I'm a little bit wary about Reggie Bullock, even though earlier in the year it was kind of all, even myself included, gung-ho, like let's bring him to Philly. I've kind of cooled off on that a little bit.
Okay, I'm still a Reggie Bullock believer. I think Dorian Finney, any of these guys, Dorian Finney-Smith. I'm also fine with Davis Bertans coming over. I think that's you can do some stuff in the rotation with him playing the 4 next to Embiid that I think could look pretty good. And one last kind of trade that I've heard a little bit of buzz around that I want to bounce off you is Furkan Korkmaz for Kendrick Nunn in a swap for the Lakers, and the Lakers starved for shooting. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so Kendrick Nunn is an interesting guy just because he has struggled mightily this season, as have like every Laker.
Right.
But you kind of saw the archetype, in Miami. That being said, like Kendrick Nunn is simply not the player that he was in Miami. He had the knee injury. That's clearly affected him. But is this rust? Is this rust and a lack of a role that he's playing like this now? So I think that you could easily say, I have to double check Nunn's deal if he's on a 1 year. Yeah, he's on a 1 year. So I think that you can kind of make an argument similar to the Corey Joseph deal, as far as like this could potentially make sense. If you are going to do that, like you might be talking about like, hey, is there a way that we can sneak in a second round pick from the Lakers as well? Just because Nunn has been so bad to start the year. So if you're talking about like Korkmaz for Nunn in a second round pick, sign me up. Absolutely. I'd be all over it.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this was good spitballing. Sixers have a tough stretch coming up. We're gonna start wrap this up here. But Zach, I appreciate you for coming on, man. Let everybody know where they can find you. You're everywhere right now. So fill everybody in, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. Obviously, I was more than excited to come on, talk Sixers basketball, support Pick Swap. More importantly, get a chance to catch up and talk Sixers with a good friend of mine. So super stoked about it. But as far as where you can find my stuff, at ZChavo on Twitter. I am the managing editor with Philly Sports Network for the Philadelphia 76ers. So Philly Sports Network, you can check it out. Check us out in the paper, Metro Philadelphia. You can also find me Section 215. I am the expert of that site as well for all of your general Philly sports needs. And don't forget to check out our Sixers podcast over at PSN. That is Philly Sports Network, the Baseline Scoop, where you can hear our Sixers takes and possibly your own Sean Barnard sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that. And all awesome stuff. So make sure you guys check that out. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. And I will talk with you next time.